Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. On this episode today, I will be targeting exclusively white catfish. I've gotten a lot of questions from my subscribers and viewers alike that had asked me a lot of questions regarding this catfish species. Today I will be targeting this catfish species on the north end of the lake at beautiful Lake Berryessa. A lot of folks have asked me whether or not I have traditional catfish fishing gear, and yes I do. Catfish fishing on the west coast does not have to be complicated, but today, for sake of example, I will be fishing with my Whisker Seeker Luke Nichols series catfish and carp rods. The rig I will be using is a fish finder rig. It is a very simple rig, but the trick for targeting white catfish is to use a smaller hook. I've demonstrated this rig on this channel several times when I'm targeting catfish and stripers with bait. The bait of choice I'm using is salted Kier sardines, particularly because the store I was purchasing bait at didn't have any anchovies available, so I instead bought sardines. Because the sardines are a lot much bigger than anchovy, I will fillet small portion of the sardines, and therefore I will also use miracle thread to wrap it around the hook. I will leave the hook point exposed, particularly because I am catch and release fishing today, so I will be using a wide gap circle hook for the ease of catch and release. If I were to be retaining fish, I would use an octopus hook. The parcel of bait doesn't have to be really neat, but the hook point should be exposed. The area I chose to target today for white catfish is at the north end of the lake where a creek runs through. The reason I choose the north end of the lake for white catfish is particularly most white catfish or bullhead species will always be found near the shallower end, which will tend to be the north end of most of these giant reservoirs. Anytime there is a river arm or a creek that feeds into the lake, I find that white bullhead and bullhead in general will gravitate toward these areas that will tend to be much more siltier and shallower, whereas channel catfish will tend to navigate more towards the flats, edges, humps, points, and river channels or creek channels. However, the exception is in the springtime. During the springtime, channel catfish and bullhead species will often intermingle in these areas. But as the season progresses into summer and fall, the channel catfish will leave these areas, but the bullhead such as the white catfish, brown bullhead, and yellow bullhead will continue to roam around these areas. The white catfish, however, is the strangest of the bullhead species. They can tolerate brackish water, and after normally the spawn, they will often remain in the areas close to where they have spawned. These fish do not travel a lot, so they are excellent and easy for the beginner catfish angler to target, especially if you're new and fishing from the bank. A white catfish has picked up the bait on the rod on the left hand side. I know he is swimming towards me, so all I did was pick up the rod and I'll start to feel and reel up the slack. This will allow me to hook the catfish with the circle hooks. The biggest difference between a white catfish bite and a channel catfish bite is often the difference in how the bait is taken. I find that white catfish will make slow roving maneuver where the rod tip will not move as much, whereas when a channel catfish tend to strike, if it is a large channel catfish above 3 to 4 pounds, the rod will bend like a freight train like it's getting yanked into the water. Most white catfish I catch will tend to have very soft bites, therefore using a smaller hook will help a lot in the hook set. Despite them having a very giant mouth, I find that a white catfish will tend to mess around with the bait a lot more than a channel catfish would. This is a very nice white catfish from this reservoir during this time of year. Fall is here, so there will be a lot of fish this size roaming the shallow. These fish make excellent eating fish, despite what a lot of folks will think. This is a beautiful fish. I am not retaining any fish today, so I will show them to you guys real quick. I think these fish are gorgeous, but a lot of people see them as pests, particularly when they're trying to fish for channel catfish. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. Fall is here. The temperatures are cooling down rapidly. Despite the daytime temperature still being moderately warm, the water temperature has dropped quite a bit. Therefore, the need to fish at the crack of dawn is not necessary. While adjusting the secondary camera, the rod on the right hand side received a very violent strike. Sometimes the white catfish will strike violently, but I know that they are a white catfish and not a channel catfish because they will often not have the strength to bend the rod completely. They'll often run side to side, whereas a channel catfish will perform death rolls. That is how I know I've hooked into a white catfish, because I find that most white catfish will fight almost similarly to a very small carp that have been hooked. One important factor when targeting white catfish I will recommend to the new angler is don't stress about bait. I find that white catfish will take a wide variety of bait, so when using bait you don't necessarily have to use just store-bought bait from the bait shop, but you can actually use a lot of grocery store bait such as shrimp, hot dog, and even Slim Jims. These fish are not picky. This white catfish is a great example of why I use casting gear when I go catfish fishing. This fish somehow managed to tangle onto a small stump, but with the casting gear and the 20-pound leader, I'm able to just wrestle him out with the stump, thus freeing him. I'll show him to you guys real quick, and this is another gorgeous white catfish. He is full fin and very full colored. All his fins have been restored from after the spawning season. It is fall now, so they have regrown and are feeding actively, knowing winter is coming. Thanks for playing, little guy. Off you go. Now this is the target fish I really wanted to show my viewers and subscribers. On the rod on the left hand side, I am getting a very small but nimble bite. This is actually a yellow or brown bullhead style bite. The rod tip will not move a whole lot, and the fish will just continue to mosey around despite being hooked on the circle hook already. When this situation occurs, it is very important to watch the line, because if you were to let the line continue moving and the fish continues to pick up the bait, they will often end up swallowing the hook despite using a circle hook. So what I'll do is I'll pick up the rod and just give the rod a quick little lift, and what that will do is cause the circle hook to end up hooking the fish. I know that this fish is not a white catfish, neither is it a channel catfish. This is probably a bullhead and more than likely a yellow or a brown bullhead, based on how it is fighting. A bullhead will typically run almost like a white catfish, but will often feel more so like a wet sock. As for the gear I'm using, a lot of anglers often have asked me whether or not there is such things as traditional catfish fishing gear. Well, in my opinion, there is traditional catfish fishing gear, but on the West Coast in particular, we don't have any scenario where traditional catfish fishing gear is truly needed. I particularly only fish with traditional catfish fishing gear because I am an enthusiast, and as for your weekend anglers, any kind of spinning rod will actually do and suffice. Particularly when it comes down to the bullhead catfish family species fishing. This brown bullhead had actually swallowed the hook a little bit deeper than I anticipated, but I am not worried and I will cut the line and reverse extract the hook. This is another bullhead species called the brown bullhead. Contrary to popular belief, a lot of anglers had emailed me plenty of photos claiming they've caught juvenile flatheads in Northern California, but what they are showing me is a brown bullhead. After extracting the hook, he is strong and able to swim again. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. While watching NFL updates on my phone, somehow the rod on the left got bit and I wasn't paying attention. But when I realized it got bit, I finally noticed that the fish might be swimming towards me. So I ended up picking up the rod and feeling for the bite to see if the fish had swam towards me. I ended up reeling up the slack and then lifting the rod up. The fish was on, and this is another white catfish. It is pulling side to side, therefore I know it is a white catfish and not a channel catfish, neither is it a yellow or brown bullhead. As for what I mentioned earlier about the brown bullhead and the flathead catfish, it is often a case of mistaken identity and species identification by anglers whom often don't have much experience with catfish fishing. If there were ever to be flathead catfish that ever established a population in Northern California, our Fish and Wildlife Commission would completely freak out, because particularly with flathead catfish, they are extremely carnivorous and will often eat a wide variety of game fish, and including even other catfish species. I often find on the West Coast that most anglers whom often fish for catfish on the weekends will typically not know what species of catfish they have hooked. Most anglers on the West Coast will only know of two species, the channel catfish and the white catfish. and in most cases, they'll often even confuse the two. This is a very jumbo white catfish. This fish is probably pushing almost 3.5 to 4 pounds. In our state of California, a 7 to 8 pound white catfish is a rare fish. Our state record is 20 pounds, but I believe the state record was actually a pet fish that was released into a local pond and captured afterward. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. The evening is approaching fast, so I was on my phone and I wasn't paying attention to the rod again. This time, the left-hand rod really took off, so all I had to do was just pick up the rod and started reeling. This is another white catfish. I know it's a white catfish because it is pulling side to side again. Overall, hopefully this episode helped the new anglers that are new to catfish fishing, or even the seasoned anglers, understand what the white catfish and the bullhead catfish species is compared to the channel catfish or the blue catfish. The bullhead species of catfish is the easiest species for the new anglers of catfish fishermen to target. Oftentimes, they are often the first catfish many new catfish angler will end up catching. They are not picky when it comes down to bait, and oftentimes they are widely available in many of our Northern California reservoirs. They are also widely available in our San Joaquin River system and the Sacramento River system as well, whether it be the Delta or many of the creeks and sloughs that dots off from the river channels and the old rivers. Now this is a really nice white catfish. This fish is probably pushing almost 4 pounds. For this reservoir, a fish this size is a really nice fish, particularly for the fall. I've caught fish close to 5 to 7 pounds from this reservoir, but in the fall, I tend to catch a lot of these smaller fish, around 2 to 3 pounds. But this fish is a very jumbo fish. I personally think white catfish are a very cool looking fish. A lot of anglers hate them because particularly they will take bait from a lot of guys trying to channel catfish fish or striper fish. But I think they are a very cool fish and an underappreciated fish. Alright big guy, thanks for playing. Rest up a bit and off you go. Overall, it was a great day on the water. I managed to catch a few white catfish for my viewers and subscribers alike. Hopefully this episode answers all the questions regarding this species of fish and the bullhead catfish species in general. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, tight lines y'all.